Hi, so welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. So you have a new EP that's coming out soon. This is very exciting. So I just have a few questions. So you started a series on TikTok called Unbloom with me, where you kind of go through every track in this EP. And you mentioned how the title for this EP is also a lyric in the first track, Baby's Breath.
Mhm.
And so normally, Bloom often has like a significance of rebirth. Is Unbloom the opposite, or what exactly does Unbloom mean for you?
Yeah, so Unbloom for me, I was thinking about how a lot of people use language like of your youth, like, oh, you're like blooming, you're growing up, that sort of thing. But I've sort of reached the point where now I'm like, okay, youth is over. And I'm still growing as a person and I'm still changing and like adapting and that sort of thing. And it really feels like it's the start of something new. So it feels like I'm sort of like coming out of that. So that's where I got the title Unbloom, where it's like everything I've learned and internalized up until now, I'm working backwards to sort of like unpack it and see like, oh, the things that I've learned and internalized and like the messages I got from my family or from society, like, do they align with who I am as a person? So I think of like the process of unblooming as the shedding, where it's like to some people it might be like, oh, your time is over, you're done sort of thing. But to me, I'm like, no, this is just like a new transformation.
That's very insightful, actually. Going back to Baby's Breath, so you mentioned how the theme is about being coming to terms with your autonomy as a person. How does your identity as a non-binary person play into that?
That's a good question. I think for me, being non-binary and being queer is just about like stepping outside of the roles that have been laid out for you, right? I think like the roles that we have in like cis heteropatriarchy are meant to like um uphold a certain power structure in our society. And for me, in the song's Baby's Breath, it's like, okay, so as a non-binary person who the idea of like having kids just gives me so much like discomfort thinking about that happening to my body, but then also like knowing that our society wants us to have children so that they can have their labor force, and that they can continue these cycles. And I know you're in Canada, so I'm not really sure what it's like over there right now, but in the US, there are just so many laws being passed to try to make sure that the government and that the people in power can have this labor force, right? So, like recently in Arizona, the state I live in, they had like this law from like 1847 or something, like Civil War time, where they were basically like you can't have an abortion at all. And then like all these other politicians like swarmed to try to get that like not passed. So thankfully it was revoked, but just the idea that they could, within the power structure that we have, they could bring a law like that back from like over 200 years ago was wild to me. And so Baby's Breath is really like to everybody. It's not just to like a partner or to your family, but it's also to the government and to society being like, I really believe in people's right to choose, and I will make the choice that I want for me and my body, and no one besides me can have a say in that.
I think a lot of people can kind of relate to that in a sense.
Mm.
So in Baby's Breath, you have a lyric that says, "Scared they'd inherit all the rage of my father and the parts of me my mother never liked."
Mhm.
Um, I thought that was really interesting. So, and this clearly kind of, well, I interpreted it as like parental issues. Correct me if I'm wrong. So, why was that important for you to showcase in this song?
Yeah, I think you definitely hit the head on like parental issues, but I think it's also just um like if I've inherited certain things from my parents, who is to say that I won't pass that on, right? Like it's called generational trauma for a reason. And I think that a lot of people have children, hot take, a lot of people have children thinking that they can fix it, right? That like everything that they experience as a child and the wounds they have as a child, they can fix through this child that they have. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think you have to do a lot of like internal active work to make sure that that doesn't happen. And me personally, I don't have the confidence that I am where I need to be in like my mental health journey or even financially, right? Like to have a child. And I think about like, oh, all the things that caused my childhood to be difficult, I need to be very sure I won't replicate. Um, Even like against myself, right? Because I think like a lot of parents, the reason they're cruel to their children is because they have issues with themselves and like their children are their mirrors. So the things they don't like about themselves, they'll have beef with their kids over when their kids like display those behaviors. Um, so that line was just me very plainly being like, I don't want my kid to end up like me, and I don't want to have to put another human being through the things that I went through, or inherit the things that I've inherited.
You've had previous songs with that featured some lyrics in Korean, like The Man of 3,000 Years. But that's not the case for this EP. What was the decision behind that?
I think it wasn't like an active thought. I wasn't like, oh, I don't want to write in Korean for this. But I think because for all of these songs, the lyrics just came to me first, where I felt like I didn't, Korean wasn't like a vehicle that these songs needed. But that is something that I want to continue exploring in the future. I just think for these, they were like, let's just do English for now, sort of thing.
So you said that the lyrics just came to you first. Do you have some a specific type of process when it comes to writing?
I don't have a super specific process, so sometimes just like lines will come to me. So like in the song Record Player, which is the fourth song on the EP, the line, don't say you love the record unless you want to connect off it. That line came to me first, and I just like wrote it down in my notes app. And then another line of that song came, and then I kind of just like pieced it together. Um, Whereas the song Lighthouse, the lyrics for that came when I just like sat down at a keyboard and played like the same like chord progression over and over. And then it sort of just came spilling out, and I recorded it, and then I wrote down what I had improvised. So it really changes every time, but I definitely start with lyrics first, and then I usually build the production out after that.
I definitely felt the melancholy aspect throughout this EP, and
Mhm.
it does start out pretty melancholic, and then it ends up quite like on a high with record players. So I wanted to know what the intention was behind that.
Yeah, so I was like, I need a bop. I need a bop on the EP because the first three songs are all very like sad and they're ballads and they're very nostalgic. And I was like, okay, I need like one upbeat, up-tempo song. So I had that lyric for record player. And then I was like, I think I can turn this into an upbeat song. So I wrote out all the lyrics, and then I contacted my friend Joanna Young, and I was like, hey, because Joe is really good at like sort of like that funky production sound that I do not do. I do not do it well. So I asked them, and I was like, can you create a beat for this? And so I know they were really inspired by like Donna Summer and other like disco queens. And then that sort of like nostalgic, also like 90s sound. And so we created Record Player together. They wrote some of the second verse. Um, but and then when the song was complete, I was like, I have no idea where on the EP we're gonna put this song. So I tried it like in different parts, and it just didn't work because you're like emotionally in one place, and the record player kind of just swings you to the other part. So I was like, okay, this song can't go first, so it has to go last. And I think there's also like a nice um like story in terms of like what's next musically, or like, okay, so this chunk of my life, which sounds very sad on this record, is done, and now we're entering a new era. So even if my sound doesn't necessarily sound like record player, like the symbolism of, okay, this is wrapped up and now we're going in this direction.
I definitely really enjoyed that very nostalgic 80s, 90s aspect of the song. And I was wondering if you were considering exploring that in your future music.
Mm, I think so. I grew up listening to a lot of like 80s and 90s music just because of my parents. So I think that's definitely a sound that I want to explore like responsibly. And I have a lot of like more studying to do, I think. But I know me personally, I am not good at that kind of like production. So I would definitely have to like ask Joe or somebody else to be like, hey, do you want to do this with me? But I think that would be fun to like explore, and I want to continue exploring like other genres and sounds. So that's definitely a path I would be interested in just like seeing what it's like.
Have you already started thinking about another album?
Yes, I am thinking about a couple projects that I have for next year. I'm really hoping I have like a list of collaborators that I've been hitting up, just like, hey, let's write, let's do something together. And everyone's been really like responsive and um enthusiastic about it. So that's something I'm really looking forward to. Um, I love like collaborating with different musicians and producers, and that's something I definitely want to do more of. Like on this last EP, for both Baby's Breath and Did You, I collaborated with violinist Ailey Pope, who I think just took the songs like in such a beautiful direction. I literally was just like, here's a vibe I'm going for. Do whatever you want. And she did, and it sounds so good. And my friend Jacob Wolf, he like produced the violin and engineering on it, and it just sounded so good. So I feel like those songs would not be what they are if not for Ailey and Jacob. So I'm really grateful to them. And like same with having Joe and Kazo on Lighthouse. Like that song would be completely different without them. The demo doesn't have them on it, and it sounds so, so different. So I definitely want to do more collaborations next year just to see what sort of other cool things we can make together.
So, what are your main influences for this EP, would you say?
Someone that I reference just a lot is singer-songwriter Rachel Yamagata. I've always been such a huge fan of her. Her albums are like some of my favorite albums of all time, and I really just love like the ballads and the storytelling that she does. I was also really inspired by Nikki, she's like an Indonesian singer-songwriter, and I love like how she builds nostalgia in her songs. Like I've listened to Backburner so many times just because I think she does a really good job of like building like world building and taking specific emotions and just like cultivating them. Those two are really big. And I think just listening to a lot of like 90s sounds as well, like Mazzy Star, Lisa Loeb, um, just referencing them for kind of the like soft production sound where it's like a little ambient, but it's like you feel the emotions even if you're like, oh, I don't know what they're saying all the time, but I like feel the vibe of it. Um, and that was really important to me. Um, yeah, I think those are sort of the main folks that I was thinking about.
So, you also released a few zines recently, and I was
Mm.
wondering if you were thinking of doing other non-musical projects like that, so other types of media.
Yeah, I love doing collages. I did this one like painting collage um a couple years ago that was at Modified Exhibits in downtown Phoenix with my friend Kat Del Rosario, but I'm hoping to do more things like that. I think my music right now is the only art form where I don't write about things that are like explicitly political. It kind of serves as more as like my emotional inner world diary, whereas like with my poetry, which used to be like my main medium, tends to focus more on like imperialism and like family mythology and things like that. And I'm kind of hoping to find a way to integrate those two. I would also love to do more collages. I love just cutting and pasting. Um, and just writing more. I've been thinking about returning to like writing plays, which I did for a little bit. But I also learned that like you can't do everything at once. And so just trying to figure out what I want to prioritize time-wise. But I'm hoping to do as much as I can and revisit like as many mediums as possible.
Okay, so that's all the questions that I had for today. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you would like to add or share?
I would like to share that my EP Unbloom comes out November 15th. I will also be doing a performance that night at Modified Arts for Catherine Del Rosario's solo show. And I hope everyone enjoys the EP. And if you don't, do not tell me. Thank you.
Bye.